On January 28, 2001, 18-year-old Jeffrey Ben spent the evening watching the Super Bowl with friends and family at his Uncle Don's home in Clayton, Oklahoma. Sometime around 1 a.m., he left in his white pickup truck, and within minutes, neighbors near the Kiamichi River reported hearing a crash, followed by voices coming from the area. Not long after, Jeffrey's truck was found wrecked against a tree. The damage was minor, there was no blood inside the vehicle, and Jeff was gone, never to be seen again. Jeffrey Lee Ben was born on August 23, 1982, in Oklahoma, and was just 18 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was a very athletic individual who stood 6 feet 3 inches tall. He was also a proud member of the Choctaw Nation. Friends and family described him as someone who ate, slept, and breathed sports. In 2000, he'd been crowned Homecoming King, and after briefly working in Detroit, Michigan, for a fiber optic company, he returned to Oklahoma in January 2001 with plans to start college and pursue a career as a television sportscaster. On the night of January 28, 2001, Jeff spent the evening with family at his Uncle Donnie Ben's home on 9 Pine Road watching the Super Bowl. Around 1 a.m., he said goodbye and left. About 15 minutes later, neighbors near the Kiamichi River bridge reported hearing a crash, followed by voices coming from the area. Later that morning, when he had failed to return home, Don began looking for him and claimed he found the white pickup truck crashed into a tree just off 9 Pine Road, with the motor still running. Before law enforcement or Jeffrey's parents were notified, he drove the truck back to his house. The damage to the truck was described as minor, and no blood was found inside. But according to his family, something about the scene didn't make sense, specifically that the truck appeared to have been wiped clean of fingerprints. Plus, the fact that Don made no immediate attempts to search for Jeff or call the family has raised serious suspicions. He and his son, Shannon's account of the night also began to change. At first, they both said that Jeff had been at the house that night, but later changed their stories to say he had not been there at all, before eventually reverting back to the original version. This was most likely because Don's daughter, Shelley, confirmed Jeff had been there. The lie alone makes them super suspicious, as does the fact that Shannon failed a polygraph. The area where Jeffrey disappeared is rural, rugged, and difficult to search, and over time, theories began to develop about what may have happened that night. Some have pointed to the possibility that something occurred after the crash, while others believe the crash scene itself may have been staged. In 2002, investigators received a tip from a confidential informant who claimed to have actually witnessed Jeff being murdered. They also provided details on how and where the body was disposed of. 6 years later, in March of 2006, the search for Jeff ended when a logger discovered his remains in a remote area that could not be accessed by a vehicle about 2 miles from the crash site. While the manner of death was ruled a homicide, the cause could not be determined. While investigators have not publicly confirmed if the tipster pointed them to that general location, it's heavily suspected. Unfortunately, the other information from the tipster has not been publicly released. In the years that followed, the investigation faced additional setbacks. In 2007, investigators discovered that former Sheriff Elvin Flood had been storing official case records, including Jeffrey's original case file, in a private location rather than at the station. Flood was later charged with concealing public records and embezzlement. However, by that point, critical time had already been lost. Jeff's case is often discussed alongside the disappearances of 2 other men, Joe David Key and Daryl Wayne Hammonds, who also vanished within a short time frame in the same general region. All three men were in their 30s, of Native American descent, and disappeared in 2001. While Joe's remains were ultimately discovered, Daryl remains missing. If you or anyone you know has information regarding the murder of Jeffrey Lee Benn, please call the Oklahoma State Bureau of Investigation at 1-800-522-8017. Jeff's mother, Linda Miller, continues to seek answers in her son's murder, but as of May 2026, his case remains unsolved. On Christmas Day 2000, 37-year-old Kenneth Weaver was back at his new apartment that he had spent the last few days moving into. At some point that morning, he asked his roommate for a ride to a friend's home in Pensacola, Oklahoma. Once there, he allegedly received another ride to Fort Smith, Arkansas, where he'd been living with his mother, but after that, he was never seen or heard from again. Kenneth Ray Weaver, who went by Kenny, was born on January 7, 1963. At the time of his disappearance, he was 37 years old and was the father of a young son. He'd been living with his mother, but wanted to get back his independence and found an apartment with a friend in Pontotoc, Oklahoma, about 30 minutes away. In the days leading up to Christmas Day 2000, he'd been in the process of moving stuff in. On the day he allegedly disappeared, his friend and roommate claims he dropped Kenny off at a home in Pensacola, but that was later challenged by another witness who claims to have seen Kenny at that same home the day before on Christmas Eve. He said Kenny was outside on the porch and he offered him a ride to Fort Smith, which he accepted. So either the second friend has his days mixed up or his new roommate is lying. Unfortunately, what followed was a major delay in the investigation. Because Kenny disappeared near the Oklahoma-Arkansas state line, there was confusion over jurisdiction between agencies. As a result, no official missing persons report was filed until 2005, nearly 5 years after he was last seen. By then, any early leads had largely disappeared. Also, because of the discrepancy between his roommates' and friends' stories, investigators have not been able to establish a clear timeline of his final movements. Over the years, several theories have been considered. Some investigators believe Kenny may have been harmed over a possible drug-related debt, a rumor that has circulated among those familiar with the case. Others have considered the possibility that he left voluntarily, though his family strongly disputes this. They maintain that he was close to them and actively working toward a fresh start in his life. Kenneth Weaver stood 5 feet 8 inches tall, weighed around 165 pounds, and had brown hair and blue eyes. He wore gold wireframe glasses with smoke-tinted lenses and had a noticeable scar running from his chin down his neck, along with a surgical scar on his lower back. He was typically seen wearing blue jeans with either a t-shirt or a plaid shirt. If you or anyone you know has information regarding the disappearance of Kenneth Ray Weaver, please call the Pensacola Police Department at 1-918-436-2476. Kenny disappeared on Christmas Day 2000, and as of May 2026, he remains missing, and this case remains unsolved. On July 18, 2018, 18-year-old Savannah Davis and her grandmother, Novena Davis, got into a nasty argument. While the exact details of the dispute are unknown, it led to her grandmother dropping her off at her boyfriend, Donald Farmer's home. When Novena reached back out to Savannah a few days later, Donald told her that she had left with someone in a maroon car. After that, Savannah was never seen or heard from again. Savannah Ann Davis, who went by Savvy, was born in 2000, and when she disappeared, she was about to start her senior year at Vanishes High School in Ada, Oklahoma. Unfortunately, her mother was not part of her daily life, forcing her to live with her grandparents. Savannah was described as a social and well-liked individual. She was involved in the Fellowship of Christian Athletes and FFA, and worked at the Santa Fe Cattle Company restaurant in Ada. However, according to her friends, she struggled living with her grandparents and father, who also lived in the home, and had told them her ultimate goal was to join her mother, Angela, in Bakersfield, California. She said she felt her grandparents hated her and never fully understood her. Plus, her grandparents' behavior was odd leading up to her disappearance. According to Savannah's manager, they would sit at a table at the Santa Fe restaurant all night, watching her while she worked. This has led many to believe that she was under extreme supervision and control. While she was unhappy, she was still getting by, but on July 18, 2018, everything changed. According to Novena, the day began with an argument, which Savannah would say was more of an actual fight. Novena then dropped her off at her boyfriend, Donald's home, as confirmed by investigators. When Novena checked on her 2 days later, on July 20th, Donald told her she was gone and had left with someone in a maroon car. Strangely, he could not provide them with the names or descriptions of the people in the car. After that, Savannah was never seen or heard from again. What makes this case especially troubling is what happened in the years that followed. Despite Novena claiming she reported her granddaughter missing, there was no record of it, and an official report wasn't made until January 14, 2023, by her close friend, Amberly Forbes. By the time Savannah was officially entered into national databases, valuable time and potential evidence had already been lost. Some friends attempted to report her missing early on, but were told they couldn't because they were not family. At this point in the case, people started spreading lies and misinformation. For one, Savannah's friends at the Santa Fe restaurant began spreading lies that Novena and her husband had fled the state immediately after Savannah's disappearance, but that's simply not true. They did move, but not for 3 years, and only moved 70 miles away to Midwest Oklahoma. To this day, they still live in Oklahoma. Friends of Savannah's also claimed that Novena never reported her granddaughter missing, but it's possible, due to this being a small town, that officers just assumed she was a runaway, and since she was 18, they saw no point in filing the report. They also claimed how strange it was that her grandparents spent time up at the restaurant during her shift. But do you think the photo taken at the restaurant while she was working shows an upset Savannah? Since her boyfriend claims she left in a maroon car, I considered the possibility that the grandparents might have picked her up, but there is no record of them owning a maroon car. That's not to say they didn't have anything to do with Savannah's disappearance, but it doesn't make sense considering her last known location was with her boyfriend, Donald Farmer. Plus, community members have said that their relationship was very abusive. Others have theorized that Donald was telling the truth and believe she might have arranged a ride to California from someone she met online and was killed by that person after getting into their maroon car, or the person trafficked her. Regardless, her disappearance still remains a mystery, and no one has ever been arrested in connection with it. When Savannah disappeared, she stood between 5 feet 5 inches and 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighed between 160 and 180 pounds. She had blonde to strawberry blonde hair and green eyes. She also sometimes uses the name Savannah Ann Resnick. If you or anyone you know has information regarding the disappearance of Savannah Davis, please call the Pontotoc County Sheriff's Office at 580-332-4169 or the Chickasaw Nation Light Horse Police at 580-436-1166, since her disappearance occurred near tribal land. Savannah disappeared in July 2018, and as of May 2026, she remains missing, and this case remains unsolved.